And so we also just want to go right now. We have another expert joining us. This is Mark Naveau. He's a former FEMA presidential appointee. And, Mark, at this moment, we just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on what's going on behind the scenes, especially here in the nation's capital. What is the response looking like at this point with the federal and the state partnerships in place?
Well, in that area, it's identified as the National Capital Corridor region, and there are mutual aid plans and pacts amongst agencies both at the local, state, and federal level. And so they're somewhat familiar, certainly, with demonstrations and protests, not to this degree by any measure. So they were utilizing what plan was in place. Now, why they didn't have enough resources there to be able to handle this is a question that we're going to have to answer later on. But what's taking place now is they're amassing enough resources. In this case, they've gone to the Washington, D.C. National Guard to be able to come out and try and control the folks that are there and clear the Capitol building. The challenge becomes on domestic soil, the continental United States, that by Constitution, you're not allowed to use the military, that the United States Army, Navy, etc. So you have to rely upon the National Guard and mutual aid pacts from other police departments. So as they start to amass that, the challenge also becomes that you're in a very political, insightful, and inciting situation, that you want to deploy people, but you're also going to be bringing in people in military uniforms. And the challenge becomes that creates more emotion with all of this. So they have to be very careful. And we've seen already that arms are drawn to protect the chamber. So they're challenged with how do we restore law and order without having this escalate. Andrew?
And Mark, I was also kind of wondering too, the Capitol building is one of the, major buildings and institutions in the nation's capital. It's protected, 24/7. Are you surprised at the extent to which these protesters breached the Capitol? I mean, talking to, people who, like yourself, who are familiar with these emergency responses, for such a prominent target to be such a soft target, does that surprise you?
Not that they were able necessarily to get in, but also they were able to get in so easily. And that's the challenge that's going to come here now. Again, we can think about that later, but the restoration of this is going to be how do you move forward, restoring calm, order, clear that building without escalating the situation. And everybody's on pins and needles on all sides. So you've got to be careful as you move through this tactically, how you do it without creating more problems.
Because the Capitol building itself, Mark, is a huge, sprawling complex. It's not just the building itself. It's the House and the Senate office buildings where the members reside. It's the Capitol Center for, tourists and visitors. So it's all contained to that. It's not anywhere else in D.C., but it's huge. It's going to be a huge effort and undertaking for these 1,100 D.C. National Guard, 200 Virginia National Guard. There could be more reinforcements coming in. At this point, are you wondering kind of the timing involved and how long this will take to get under control?
So far, what we're seeing is somewhat peaceful protests. Now, that certainly the mob has been able to overtake the Capitol building. What I'm most concerned with is certainly preserving the building itself, all the artifacts and the history there, but also, and more importantly, is the people, the continuity of government. Because you had so many dignitaries, so many people in high-ranking positions in one building at one time, there's going to be a focus now and certainly previously to get those folks out of that building into safe areas. That is the key point right now, is to make sure those folks are safe.
Mark, just last question for you as well. As a federal appointee to FEMA, you have, been on the ground in the worst natural disasters that our country has faced, trying to get aid and help to the American people. Did you ever expect in your career and just as your, life as an American that you would see U.S. Capitol Police square off with pro-Trump protesters today on the front steps. Is that something you could ever have even acknowledged or conceived?
No, no, by any means. You know, I understand people's frustration. Everybody's heightened because we've been in a lockdown situation due to the pandemic. So emotions sitting on the surface. People are trying to vent in different ways. I'm sure that has a lot to do with this. But I think the disappointment for me personally is that our country's devolved to a point of discussion where really we don't feel like we can be heard. And so we've already heard some of the congressional members tweet and say that this is not how we're going to move forward, that we need to be able to have civil discourse, discussion about how we move our country forward, how we work through this pandemic, how we take care of those people who are suffering in the hospital. That's not going to go away, certainly after all this is taken care of. We still are challenged in our country, and we've got to be able to come together, to unite, to move us forward.
All right, Mark Nouveau, thank you so much for joining us here on News Now from Fox. Might talk to you a little bit later, so hopefully you can stick around, but we appreciate you joining us to break down this truly monumental and historic day there in the nation's capital.